Next, we're going to look at some animal groups that are acoelomate. They don't have a cavity, so they tend to be very small. But from here on, we're looking at animals that have bilateral symmetry. So these animals belong to the group Bilateria, which are animals with bilateral symmetry. And from here on, all the animals that we're going to see have bilateral symmetry. Even if they don't show a bilateral symmetry in their adult form, they descend from animals that had bilateral symmetry. When we see these animal groups, we're going to see how those groups are best adapted to their environment, and also how sometimes those adaptations allow those groups to colonize new environments, such as land. So while in plant groups, there was only one time where the ancestor of all land plants colonized terrestrial environments, in animals, the colonization of land happened in multiple animal groups independently. So we're going to see what characteristics allow those animal groups to be able to make the transition from life in water to life on land. The first group are flatworms. Since they don't have a coelom, they tend to be very small, and some of them are parasites and some of them are free living. They have a single opening for the digestive cavity, similar to what cnidarians had, and they're capable of doing both intracellular and extracellular digestion. They don't really have a circulatory system, but they have an incipient, a primitive excretory system that allows them to get rid of nitrogenous waste and trying to minimize water use. This allowed flatworms to colonize terrestrial environments so that they could get rid of nitrogenous waste and try to minimize water use. They also some of the first organisms with bilateral symmetry, and they start having some centralization of the nervous system, so you have an incipient formation of a brain, which we call encephalization. Since they don't move very much, most of these animals are hermaphroditic. That means they're both male and female at the same time, and they have internal fertilization. This is also another key in being able to colonize terrestrial environments, because internal fertilization means that the eggs and the sperm will meet inside of the organism, inside mostly of the female body, so the gametes won't dry out if they get exposed to the air. Flatworms include Planaria, which is a free-living flatworm. Many of the flatworms are parasites like flukes, and schistosomes, which can be human parasites, and tapeworms, which are also parasites. Animals that are parasites and live inside another organism have a challenge encountering a mate from the same species. So these animals tend to be hermaphroditic. That way they can be male and female, and as long as they encounter another individual from the same species, they will be able to reproduce. If they had separate sexes, they will have to find not just another organism from the same species, but also from the opposite sex. Being a parasite and living inside another organism also means that you don't need specialized sensory systems, since you won't be moving or catching prey or having to find your food. And they also tend to have simple digestive systems, as they can mostly absorb food from their host without needing to digest it. There are other less common groups of acoelomates, mostly microscopic. Now we're going to look at the Pseudosalimates. These are organisms that have an internal body cavity, but it's not a true coelom. This group includes roundworms, which can be free-living or parasitic. They're unsegmented, but they're covered by a cuticle. That cuticle prevents the loss of water, so this is also a good adaptation for land. They do their gas exchange through that cuticle. They have a well-developed digestive system. That means they have a mouth and an anus, so food just travels in one direction. And they reproduce sexually. Many roundworms are also parasites, such as Ascaris and the filarial worm, the worm that causes elephantiasis. The group Rotifera, these are very small microscopic organisms. They're free-living. They can also be sessile. That means they don't move. They are unsegmented. They also have a well-developed digestive system with a mouth and an anus. So from now on, all the groups we're going to see have a fully developed digestive system with for the opening, the mouth, and another opening for the exit of material of the anus. A microscopic image of what a rotifera looks like, you will see them if you look at a water sample from a pond. They're very common. Another groups of pseudosalimates include animals like the charismatic water bears that can survive in very extreme environments. And finally, we're going to look at the coelomates, This is a very diverse group, and coelomates include protostomes that have a different origin of the coelom and deuterostomes that have another origin of the coelom. So looking at protostome coelomates, we have ribbon worms, and these ribbon worms are mostly marine. These are a lesser known group. We have segmented worms, annelids. Most of them are free living. They have a cerebral ganglion, but since they're also segmented, they also have a neural ganglion in each of their segments. They have sensory organs at the anterior end of the organism. They have a closed circulatory system. They also have an excretory organ on each of their segments, and they use their hydrostatic skeleton for motion. And they also have a cuticle. Annelids are another group that colonize terrestrial environments independently, and these adaptations allow them to do that. So having a cuticle that prevents water loss, having an excretory system that lets them excrete nitrogenous waste while conserving water, and having a way to support their body weight outside of land by having this hydrostatic skeleton that could support the body and can also allow them to move in water and on land. Examples of annelids include polychaetes. Some might not look very worm-like. They have the structures for filtering food particles from the water. They have pogonophores. These are very specialized worms that live in deep vents in very extreme environment, and they have symbiosis with bacteria in order to survive in a place with little oxygen and no sunlight. And we have airworms and leeches that are the terrestrial examples. Now we look at another group of coelomates, the mollusk. These are very abundant. This is another group that also colonized land independently. They were able to do that because they have a shell that provides some support for their weight. They have specialized organs for excretion of nitrogenous waste. They have a circulatory system that allows them to move nutrients so they can grow. Also, organs for gas exchange that could be used to take oxygen in water or on land. Mollusks include groups such as chitons, that are mostly marine. Gastropods, here we have marine and terrestrial animals. So some of these gastropods colonize terrestrial environments, snails and slugs. Bivalves and cephalopods such as octopus, squid, cuttlefish. These animals are very diverse. They're also very successful predators. They have a big brain, and their name is cephalo is for brain and poda for feet. So this is a brain with feet. It's a testament of the smart of these animals. They have big brains, and their tentacles that they use for feeding. And the last group of coelomates we're going to look at are arthropods, which is another very successful group. Arthropods also manage to colonize land, and some of the traits that they have are the reason why they were able to succeed in land. So they have an exoskeleton that provides support to their weight and also allow them to anchor their muscles so that they can have movement. And this was successful in water, but it was also successful at letting them colonize land. These are also segmented organisms, and some of those segments fuse together and form larger structures called tagmata. Because of their exoskeleton, they're somewhat limited in size, and since they have their exoskeleton, they need to mold that exoskeleton in order to grow, and that is called ecdysis, another word for molting. They also have very specialized systems for vision. Their jointed appendages, which is what gives them their name, arthropods, were a huge advantage in being able to move in water and also turned to be very successful for motion on land. They have an open circulatory system which works because they're not very big, and they have a central brain and some ventral ganglia. They also have specialized structures for excreting waste while conserving water. So this is another adaptation that helped in their transition to living on land. The groups of arthropods include the groups of spiders and scorpions, the group of crustaceans, such as crabs and lobsters. We have an example of crustacean diversity, mostly marine animals, and they are extremely diverse. We have crabs, copepods, barnacles, although they might not look like arthropods, they might seem like a shellfish, they're actually an arthropod. Mantis shrimp and amphipods. Another group of arthropods are the class Myriapoda. This includes millipedes and centipedes. You can see here clearly the segmentation of the body. And the most successful group of all is the class Hexapoda. This is where insects belong to. This is the largest group of animals on Earth. They are extremely diverse. They live mostly on land, although they can also live in fresh water. Their segments have been combined into three main tagmata, or larger segments, that form the head, the thorax, and the abdomen. They have specialized systems for gas exchange, like trachea and air sacs. Specialized systems for gas exchange. This made them very successful on land and also allowed them to support a high metabolism. Most insects have wings and the ability to fly, and that requires being able to provide oxygen to the muscles. They can fly, which is a big part of their success. And as you remember from the evolution of angiosperms, insects were key as pollinators, enabling the evolution and diversification of angiosperms. And just as angiosperms started to diversify, insect groups also diversify. And like we said, this group is extremely diverse. We have multiple groups. It's just a few examples of families of insects, such as the beetles, butterflies, the true bugs, flies, praying mantis, bees, and ants. Damselflies, termites, fleas, and not so lovely cockroaches. But there are many more groups, and within each group, there are also hundreds and hundreds of species.